When Valentín was little, his father named Johnny Bravo taught him that fear was like any other creature in nature and that man was capable of mastering it. For this reason, his father exposed him to all kinds of dangers. He locked him in with a wolf, placed a tarantula on his body, and even threw him off a cliff. Despite all these tests, Valentín never managed to overcome even the slightest fear, let alone the greatest fear of all men, commitment. That's why although many attractive women were interested in him, he only saw them as if they were wolves whenever they started talking about starting a family. One of his couples was an American woman with whom he spent the night, and he didn't hear from her again until a year and a half later, when she returned to Valentín's house, but not alone. Valentín didn't even remember her, so she had to introduce herself again, saying her name was Julie and the baby she was holding, Maggie, was his daughter. Before clearing things up, Julie asked him for $10 to pay for the taxi. Valentín handed her the bill, believing she would be right back. After several minutes of uncertainty, Valentín received a call from Julie. Through tears, she told him that she was very sorry, but she could no longer take care of the baby. Before she hung up, Valentín managed to catch the name of the airport where Julie was. Desperate, he rushed all over Acapulco to find her, but when he arrived, it was too late. Julie was already boarding the plane. Not knowing what to do, Valentín went to the restaurant of his friends Sammy and Jodiazi, where they helped him change Maggie's diaper. His friend asked him to keep the baby, but Valentín refused, as he would have to give up the great life he had and would also have to start working. Sammy suggested that he write a letter to Angelina Jolie, as she might be interested in adopting the baby. Jodiazi came up with the idea of going to his house to find more information about the mother. While searching through his things, Valentín found an old letter from Julie. It seemed she was working at a hotel in Los Angeles. Before he set off on his journey, Jodiazi insisted that he keep Maggie, convinced that he would eventually grow attached to her. However, Valentín saw the baby as a wolf pup, so he began his journey on foot to Los Angeles. Along the way, Valentín told the baby that being in the United States was the best thing for her. A few minutes later, a trucker named Lupe stopped to give them a ride. After hours on the road, they finally reached the border. There was just one problem: Valentín didn't have a visa. So, Lupe had to hide him inside the truck along with other immigrants. Later, Valentín arrived at the hotel, where an employee told him in English that Julie no longer worked there. But Valentín didn't understand because he didn't speak English and just tried to enter. However, the employee didn't let him in because children weren't allowed in the hotel. Because of this, Valentín had to sneak in to get inside. Once inside, he left the baby in the laundry room and asked an employee about Julie. The woman responded in English that Julie had been fired after being caught sleeping with a guest in the presidential suite. Valentín only understood presidential suite, so he proceeded to go up to that room. There he met Frank, a film producer who was looking for a brave stunt double. Valentín asked him about Julie, but Frank didn't pay attention since he was on an important call. At that moment, as Valentín looked out from the balcony, he saw his daughter crawling towards the pool. So, despite being terrified and seeing the wolves that had haunted him since childhood below, Valentín jumped to save his daughter. Frank was impressed by his courage and offered him a job as a stunt double, saying he needed someone like him. Valentín turned down the offer, saying he was going back to Mexico. However, Frank mentioned that he would make a lot of money and that if he returned to Mexico, they would take the baby away at the border. With no other option, Valentín ended up accepting, and in a quick montage, it shows the girl growing up and the beautiful bond between father and daughter. This brings us to when Maggie was 7 years old. Valentín was in the bathroom, trying to calm his nerves before filming his stunt scene. Noticing he was taking too long, Frank approached him and reminded him that he was doing this to give Maggie a good life, and that no other job would pay him up to $10,000 a day. Valentín went to the film set, where he worked as Johnny Depp's stunt double and had to be launched several times from a catapult. On one of those takes, he took a hard hit and was knocked out, but Maggie brought him back to life by reciting a magical ritual. Later, they returned to their building, where their landlord, Mr. Anderson, handed him his mail. In the elevator, they ran into their neighbor, who mentioned that her drain was clogged again and she needed his plumbing services. When they got to their apartment, they spent the entire afternoon playing with all the toys they had.
A little different than all the rest. I'm quite old-fashioned where I had sometimes played chess. And when I'm out, I'm looking for that vintage fling.
That night, Maggie asked him to tell her the story of her grandfather Johnny Bravo, the same one he told her every night. Valentín told her that his father was the best diver, and to make him just as good, he threw him off a cliff. It was a terrifying experience, but because of it, he wasn't afraid of anything anymore. Hearing this, Maggie asked him to take her to jump off that cliff too, but Valentín replied that he would never do something like that to her. Before going to bed, they noticed that among the mail Mr. Anderson had given them, there was a new letter from Julie. Excited, Maggie began to read it. Her mother, as usual, wrote about the incredible adventures she was having, sailing on the Titanic, stopping war tanks, meeting Einstein, and much more. Julie was always out saving the world, which was why she couldn't come to see her. Obviously, it was Valentín who wrote the letters so Maggie wouldn't know her mother had abandoned her. The next day, Maggie reminded her dad that he needed to go to the doctor soon. He didn't want to go because he was scared, so the little girl reassured him by saying she would go with him, but that he also needed to learn to go on his own because one day they wouldn't be together. A few minutes later, they arrived at the school, where the principal asked why his daughter was absent so often. Valentín explained that he takes her to film sets or somewhere else to have fun. The principal then mentioned that because of this, Maggie was having some problems. The other kids were teasing her about the incredible stories she told about her mother. Even though the principal knew Valentín was a good father, it seemed like he was constantly rewarding his daughter to make up for something. The next day, they went to the doctor. After giving Valentín a shot and vitamins to Maggie, the doctor asked to speak with him alone to tell him that the treatment hadn't worked and there wasn't much time left. When he left the office, Valentín pretended everything was fine and told her the doctor had prescribed something special. After getting off the ride, a woman mistook Maggie for her daughter, which made the little girl sad. Maggie expressed her wish to see her mom at least once in her life. These words made Valentín think, so he decided to do something about it. He asked Frank to organize a casting to find someone who looked like Julie. However, the effort was in vain, as none of the candidates convinced him. Later, just as he returned to his apartment, Valentín received a call from someone who introduced herself as Julie. At first, he thought it was one of the women from the casting, but he was shocked to discover it was Maggie's real mother, calling because she wanted to see her daughter. Find out what happens next in the second part of this movie.